This actually fits in with something that I have to remind myself every time I go outside Australia. I can't say the other side of the black stump because nobody else has got one. In America, it's out in the boonies, which is a different story entirely. And that's an idiom which we know, and we don't even think about it because it's part of our everyday language. Now, there was a gentleman, a Frenchman called Jean-Paul Nerrière, and he realized that people around the world were making do in English with a kind of cut-down English, but it wasn't always the same cut-down English. Lots of misunderstandings. So he thought, why can't we regularize this in some reasonable way so that everybody can communicate? He developed a thing called Globish, which is global English, and it has 1,500 core words. And it's really interesting because the words are defined in terms of other Globish words, as it were, and you can say an astonishing amount with Globish words. I think he looked at what was common, necessary, and in particular part of business speak and business negotiations. Now, the rules are standard English grammar, no jokes, as you said, because jokes, he said, I cannot understand jokes of my English colleagues. But also no idioms, so you can't push up daisies. Now, to someone from overseas, pushing up the daisies sounds as if you're under the ground, sort of helping the daisies rise up, whereas in fact, of course, it means to be dead. No winning hands down. That was an easy way of winning on a horse. When your horse is so far in front, the jockey doesn't have to urge the horse forward. You just drop your hands. The horse runs on and wins anyhow. Or being over the moon, meaning very pleased and delighted, but literally over the moon. It sounds astronomical and a little bit odd. So no jokes, no idioms, and it is a code for business communication. Nerrière says this is correct English without the English culture. Now that's an interesting claim, because can you have a language without culture? Words do have cultural values of various kinds. I mean, for example, the word red used to be the colour of communism, but in China it's also a good luck colour, and that's why so many Chinese restaurants are painted red. It seems to me, though, that this Globish is really good for second language English speakers, because they are already aware that there are certain gaps around in communication, that you've got to be understanding of the other person. You're not talking about the other side of the black stump. And so I think they would more naturally make the adjustments for clear, objective, unambiguous communication, even if it's a bit flat, right? The real problem is if you're a first language speaker of English, because you've got to learn how to cut down the code, and that doesn't come easy if your natural language is English.
You need to grow up with foreign parents.
Indeed, or with foreign relatives, or in a bilingual household where, say, you go to school in one language but you talk another language at home, and that makes you aware of the differences between the two. Globish isn't the first one, and in fact, a bloke called Madhukar Gogate, who I imagine has to be Indian, had used the word Globish about 6 years before, but Nerrière came along and I think grabbed everything. He patented the name and the concept. In other words, there was 1,500 in the box, that was it, and you couldn't sort of tinker with it without permission. So it's a way of making sure that there is a stable code. Same thing had been done by a man called I.A. Richards, who invented basic English in the 1920s. He had 2,000 words, so he needed a little bit more. Globish has got words like except. Now, you think about except, that is a very important, reasonably common word.
Yes.
Meaning you receive something which is given to you, all right? And it's got word like advertisement, because this is business. It's got word like afraid. No, I'm afraid I can't see you this afternoon. Okay.
And they used afraid instead of scared, which sounds more appropriate for business.
I'd think so too. Scared has overtones of maybe cowardice or something.
I'm scared to meet you is not a polite way to...
No. You're a bit intimidating. Words like agree, okay, so that if you work through the list of words, you see, hey, I can say quite a lot in this thing. If you consciously remove the emotional content of these words, you'll see that it's actually got quite an interesting role. A lot of first language speakers of English, they go overseas and they just assume that whoever they meet is going to understand their English, and as you say, with the right kind of pronunciation. Those who know a bit better can wind their English back a bit to a more... Now, there is something called English as an international language, but it doesn't actually have a set vocabulary.